Hello, Noir Vortex, and today I'm just going to write the opposite of that. Read a few pieces I've written recently. I'm trying to keep myself in the whole writing routine, which has been pretty good actually so far. But essentially, I've written so I've got one short story I wrote recently, which I'll read as the final part, and then also I've written a few writing exercises, sort of just like thoughts and reflections, almost a bit like a diary in some senses. But I posted them all on Facebook, and I just thought to myself, why? Nobody reads that shit. Nobody cares. You don't really get any engagement on Facebook. I mean, even if you write something you think is relatively well crafted and is humorous or whatever, no one cares. People are more it's Facebook. It's chip paper. So I thought I'd just read a few of these things I wrote mostly last night, and then I'll finish this vlog by reading a short story I did recently. So anyway, without further ado, the way this is going to go is I'm just going to read a few different extracts, some of them short, some of them longer, then we'll go on finally on to the short story, and I'll talk a little bit about each rough cases. So this is all stuff I wrote last night. So the first thing is just thinking about, in a very short form, about this quote I read by Carl Jung, as to regards a premonition of the future of humanity. So Carl Jung, you might have heard this, he sort of had a premonition about the First World War, and if you can believe it, the Second World War as well. He sort of had this premonition about these events happening with dreams and all that sort of thing. So you buy that or don't, but I thought this quote was quite interesting about basically the future long after he died. He said, "I see enormous stretches devastated, enormous stretches of the earth, but thank God, not the whole planet. A grim foretelling of the future that feels more real day by day. Still, at least he saw a glimmer of light in the darkness. Guess that is reason enough to hope in our increasingly mad world." So yeah, what started me writing that very short piece, which is the shortest piece of all these, was just finding out about this, because I'd heard about Carl Jung and his premonitions of the devastation that was the first two world wars, but what I didn't know about this fact that he actually had a premonition of what's to come further after that. It's quite chilling, really, in a way. So it was just my sort of very brief summing up of that. And then that got me sort of thinking more about, the generation that I'm a part of. So, I'm a millennial. I was born in 1986, so I think that just makes me a millennial. Sort of elder millennial, maybe in some ways, but yeah, still a millennial nonetheless. I'm 35 now, so I sort of think about these sort of things a bit more. Not so much about, I don't buy into the whole idea of generations being completely defined, but they do have a prevailing mood and set of attitudes for sure, which is, sort of the generational differences that can emerge. So this is a piece of writing about the millennials, in which I call them the Doomer generation. So without further ado, I'll read this. So, been thinking a bit about what is going to be the prevailing mood of my generation, the millennials. The word that comes to mind is the Doomer generation. We are a generation born of Kurt Cobain's Howl on MTV and the emptiness at the heart of consumerism. Sure, we loved our video games, found punk bands on Napster, and surfed, and even helped create, the digital netherworld in which we spend a great portion of our lives. But it left us wanting. We dreamed, and we were disappointed. We wanted a chaotic, decentralised digital heaven, and we've created Facebook. We saw 9/11 live on our television sets, the splinter that began the 21st century. We didn't know what to think, and we watched as politicians invented obvious lies which were as plain as day is tonight. Politics became just another TV show, more entertainment fodder for our dull irises to download, our eyes of pure static. Since then, we've collectively become the jaded, terminally ill children of the new technological age. Cynicism and crushed hope, intelligence without a way to express it, a voice choking under its own bile. Acceleration, accumulation, acid rain. I guess the question is, can we see a world beyond the gloom? Can the doomers overcome? Well, winter does strange things to my brain. I wonder, is it a sign of getting older that you look back more than you look forward sometimes? Nostalgia for the world as it was, and a fear of what it may become. Love, Chris, and the wild protects. Gobert. Gobert, so talking French. I am Chris Noir protects Gobert. Oui, oui. Bonsoir, bonjour. Etc, etc. But yeah, that was sort of like a bit of, I guess, freeform sort of stream of consciousness thinking about, just trying to sum up, like, so, we're the children of the millennials. We lived through the millennial moment, which was this, always thought to be a moment of great change, and I guess in some respects it has been. We are the sort of, like I was hinting at in the piece, we were born into an age of technology, and in a lot of ways we're the most privileged generation that's ever existed, in other ways not. Like, how many of my friends own a house, for example? There's not less security in the millennial age. We have access to endless distraction, television, YouTube, any type of pornography you want to access. Just type it into YouPorn or whatever, you're going to find it. But I think there's something very empty about our lives in a certain respect, that we have access to so much, and have we squandered it? I mean, I guess that's the question, really. Well, I think that's pessimistic to say we have, but maybe we have. I don't know. It's more asking a question. And then this is just a very short piece I wrote about. I'm a painter and artist and all that, and I just wanted to sort of just create a very short few paragraphs here about the actual how amazing that is, to be honest. I'll just go into this and talk about it after, actually. So this is like just ruminations on artistic creative process. Something quite amazing in the idea of how artwork you make as a painter ends up spread all over the world, in the homes of friends, in small little intimate collections that people grow and treasure. Something magical about being able to share a part of your soul and mind with others this way. It's almost like you can leave relics of your life behind for the future, windows into the dust of eternity. In that sense, art is possibly the only time travel we'll ever invent. That's why I obviously got this short and sweet, but I think there's something like truth in that. It's one of the I think it's one of the great consolations of existence. Of it. If you are creative and you like painting and drawing, you have that ability or talent that you've developed. It is one of the most rewarding things in your life to be able to just share that gift to others. And like I always wonder, like, I've sold a fair amount of paintings. I'm not like dead successful. I can't live off my paintings, but I've actually sold probably upwards of 20 paintings and drawings in the past. A few hundred quid there, a few hundred quid here. It's just not like I can live off it, but I just love the thought that those things which I created are now existing, and they're probably, not even joking, but at least 20 people's houses and homes somewhere. And that's pretty cool, really, to be honest. This is the final of the shorter pieces, and then I'll go on to the story, which will be... So this video until it'll be about 20 minutes, but bear with it. So this is quite a surrealist piece. My mate Matt posted up this photo up. I'll actually post it up on screen of Mary Poppins going in. There's like a Photoshop thing of Mary Poppins going into a war zone, and I was just like, I thought it was such a bizarre image that I just wrote this piece off on the fly based on it. So it's Mary Poppins the War Machine. Mary Poppins the War Machine. Men wept at her feet for forgiveness, but she was brutal with her brolly and had no time for Nazis. Her and the bear Jew, Chris Godber, would beat them to death with almost religious fervour. Her and her brolly, and he with his Nazi-beating baseball bat. Gaz shook in the corner, providing musical accompaniment as the Nazi beatings took place. Sketty rode out on his horse. All became darkness, until they wiped the darkness of fascism from the face of the planet. On that day, Peter Sketty Barnes rode out on his horse and honoured the fallen. Gaz played his bagpipes louder and louder than ever before. Martin smiled and began to dance to the ecstatic noise, his body dancing and gyrating to some eternal, timeless rhythm as he dry-humped the air, becoming the mother of the new hope. So much was now rubble. It was time to build from supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. So I don't know what that is, but I don't know. It's quite funny. I guess it's not. It's sort of like dark humor, isn't it? I mean, it's a really dark subject, but just sort of dark absurdism, I guess. And I was just like, I included some of my mates in it. I was just sort of like a creative shitpost, really. I just sort of tagged some of my friends in. We have these sort of in jokes in between them. A bunch of my friends from home, like sort of make Peter Sketty Barnes, who actually does a bit of writing himself. He's quite creative. We always have this thing that he's like one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, right? And then we have a friend Gaz, who's just like a comedic fella with a big head. And then Matt Nins always tends to be a sort of dancing trickstery fool, but he's great. He's a great lad, but I always see him that way, like a sort of almost like Yoda, sort of foolish wise man in a sense. But yeah, anyway. So that's that. That's the 3 pieces. And I'll get finally onto this short story I wrote, which I'll read with Ernest now. So this is called The Boy Who Loved the Dark. It's a short story I finished a few weeks ago. It is sort of a fairly obvious self-insert on my case, but I don't mind doing that. I mean, I wouldn't call the character in it Chris, but I thought it'd be an interesting sort of self-analysis routine to do that. So this is the story of the boy who loved the dark. This is the story of the boy who loved the dark, and in turn how the dark loved him. It was 12 a.m. Chris looked above at the star in the distance, contemplating the enormity of it. That squid oil swirling in a vortex of nothingness, the womb from which he was born, eternity. He was alone, stuck to the ground like a magic spell had wrapped itself around his feet, curling into his very being as he was overcome with something between emotion and absolute detachment, an ecstasy of morbidity, a melancholy of a moment. Drowning in these waters again, a dreamer without woes or worry, save for the idleness of the infinite. The ticking of the clock, tick-tock. Ha! Chris sniggered to himself, thinking, I had a bit too much of the old spice tonight. Better hit the hay. And with that, he collapsed like a 4-line dying star onto the sofa, melting into the eternal one deep slumber. The passing of dark to night, of dreams to reality, and reality to dreams. Chris awoke to the sound of morning birds coming through his window as he slowly opened his eyes, letting the light in, shining through his thin curtain windows. Yawning, he slumped out of bed, still a little baked from the night before, and proceeded to his work chamber. Assignment number 287, the Maelstrom Project. A shifting red light moved across the neon green screen as Chris darted his eyes around the screen, directing energy beams of data from one spatial node to the next, linking concepts and visual maps into a sense the machine would be able to digest. Assignment number 287 was very important, hush-hush of course, though Chris would have a hard time describing what it all meant ultimately, and aspects of the code were kept locked out from even him. Protected data silos, linking the real and the unreal as well as making a gluttonous mess. And it was a mess that appeared before his eyes. A true maelstrom if ever he had seen one. He was looking at his own code, and it was then that he discovered that maybe coding till 12 a.m. so high that you thought the sun was talking to you wasn't the best idea when you have a mighty list of features, bugs, and the sheer random chaos of code to contend with. Escapism, the moral enemy of every programmer, the poison we dare not taste, for we know how sweet it can feel, and how it can rot at our mechanical hearts. He examined the code he'd managed to produce last night in, he thought, a flurry of creative energy and problem solving. There are moments of good engineering in there. Some of the code structure certainly made sense. But it was the dodgy looking sharp edges that bothered him. Half-completed functions hung dormant like half-finished love affairs, or a half-eaten bacon sandwich. Pure violence. His code was beating him in the face, was punching him in the face, beating his confidence to a pulp as the inevitable intake of breath every programmer knows. This was crunch time, and Maelstrom had to be delivered next week, so there was no choice. Besides, who had ever committed suicide from looking at their own bad code? How bad could it be? How bad could it get? He knew the solution would be caffeine. That much was inevitable. You had to know your uppers and downers to be a good programmer, at least in the world he resided in anyway. The spectres of information in a dark net dystopia. He dived into the chaos of his programmatic Rosetta Stone inside. He had the overall function there, structure there, the foundations as it were, but there was bad workmanship on view from many angles. Half-finished functions that were turned into unreliable data, sharp edges which could bleed were one to fall on them, and the scaffolding was in a phrase, a pile of concrete shit. Hours passed in his chamber of work as he scribbled on the metaphorical walls of the cave before him for the answers to present themselves. Fixing bits here and there was slowly leading to a structure of sorts, but he had to admit defeat. He was struggling, his eyes slowly drifting into the back of his head as the inevitable fatigue began to hit. It was 11 o'clock at night already. The sun had receded far away to be replaced by the glimmering lights outside and the urban foxes wandering endlessly. His mind wandered. He could leave it, of course, but there's a few functions almost mocking him, goading him with their untapped secrets. So close and so far, he thought to himself, teetering on an anxious edge. Then his mind wandered to that new substance the dealer had given him a few months back. Left untouched in his storage box, an old copy of Neuromancer by William Gibson with a secret storage box. It was called Sorcerer's Stone, the dealer had told him. Much stronger than his usual dirtweed, this, the dealer promised, would really take him down a spiral of meaningful insanity. Well, in fact, he actually described it more like, "This is some good shit, lad!" Would he repeat the same mistake again? It was a foregone conclusion by now. Chris lifted the strange substance out of his tatty copy of Neuromancer. It was clumpy green and glowed with an almost unnerving ambient pulsing glow, the likes of which he had never seen before. An almost hypnotic glare that pierced into his soul. He lifted it out carefully and reached for his wooden pipe on his shelf. Carefully, loading up and grabbing his lighter, he took a deep breath and inhaled. He felt nothing. Returning to his computer screen, he scanned the screen looking for areas of improvement. Suddenly, feeling more alert, more awake somehow, unconscious in a more cerebral manner than before. The Sorcerer's Stone was obviously starting to have an effect as he began to type frantically, his fingers themselves blurring. As he stared downwards, his fingers began to take on a mind of themselves as he disconnected from his body. Stretching outwards and inwards, he felt the feeling of disconnection as the stone took control of his fingers, furiously slamming down on the keyboard as he drowned in static light. The whiz and buzz of the machine embroiling him in a vortex of cascading zeros and ones as he became beyond binary, the pulse of the machine. He was high as fuck. Stunning bright light shone in through the curtains, piercing Christopher's eyes as he blinked once and twice. His head had fallen like a rock on the keyboard of his computer. He glared at the sun and the dawning of the light, awakening slowly to a new day. He looked up at this code to inspect what he had done the previous night, a night where it felt as if some force external had guided him through a maze of spectral green neon-lit abstraction he hoped to treasure. He ran the Maelstrom program and smiled. The interface booted up with a magical whir, and the data visualization from the government database looked perfect. Its three-dimensional graphical forms appearing, platonic forms in the digital nexus. It was beautiful. Chris took a moment to feel proud. Then, the assignment 287 source code was shipped to the cathedral's databank, whizzing across cyberspace to be applied in some distant colony. Assignment 288 landed on his desk. Chris looked at the sun and grimaced, his melancholic state returning as he accepted the reality of his existence. A hamster on a wheel, a boy who loved the dark. So that's that. Obviously, sort of autobiographical piece. I'd be interested in what anyone thinks of that. If you've stuck it all up, pretty happy with that actually. It's obviously sort of me working through some stuff, sort of writing piece, but that can be good sometimes. I've got another one in the works, so try and get that finished in a few weeks. But it's Christmas time, so no guarantee. But yeah, leave your comments below. I'll leave it at that. It's 20 minutes already, so there's my 20 minutes worth of writing for the last few weeks, I guess.